everyone, today I'm going to be doing my October wrap-up. I read a total of 11 books this month, so let's go ahead and get started. The first book that I read this month was Byrd Box by Josh Malerman. So this is a dystopian book about a woman named Mallory. As she tries to survive, she protects two small children from these monsters that if you look at them, then you go crazy and you kill people before you kill yourself. So she hides in this house and boards up all the windows, and if she wants to go outside, then she has to be blindfolded. I found this book to be very repetitive, and I was a bit disappointed that the book didn't really answer any of the questions that it posed, like what the heck are these monsters, what do they want? I was just like left at the end like, well, am I supposed to use my own imagination to figure out what happened? I just didn't like that. I ended up giving this book 2 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Final Girls by Riley Sager. So this is a thriller. We follow Quincy as she tries to cope with a tragic incident that happened to her 10 years ago. As the only survivor of a murder spree, the media has dubbed her a final girl. There are 2 other girls that go through separate horrific mass murders, and they are also final girls. I like this book, especially the baking scenes, but this book was kind of slow. That is until we get more than halfway through and things really start to pick up. I didn't expect the twist at the end because it was so out of left field. It didn't really mesh well with the story that was leading up to it though, but it definitely had a lot of shock value. I ended up giving this book 3 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Horns by Joe Hill. This is about a guy named Ig who wakes up one morning to a pair of horns protruding from his head. He thinks he's hallucinating, so he decides to go see a doctor. Even before he arrives, strange things start to happen. Everyone he encounters is eager to tell him their darkest, most secrets, and deepest desires, no matter how unbecoming or embarrassing it is. This is a very adult book with lots of profanity and sex. Everyone really doesn't like Ig, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's the #1 suspect in his girlfriend's murder. But there's no evidence to back it up, and everyone still thinks he's guilty. The entire time I wanted things to go right for Ig. I just felt so sorry for him. I liked how the book was layered though, and it kept coming back to the night that his girlfriend was murdered, making me understand the whole situation better. This was a good book, but it just made me feel gross. It made me feel bad about 99% of the time. It was really, I guess, gruesome and daring. I ended up giving this book 3 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is about a young boy who loses his entire family and winds up living up in a graveyard and is raised by supernatural entities. This book was so cute. I love the illustrations. I thought this book was cleverly done, and it kept my attention the whole time. It was everything I was hoping for and more, filled with magic and lots of adventure. It was such a delightful read that I think anyone who picks this up would enjoy it. I gave this book 5 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Carrie by Stephen King. This is King's first published novel. It's so iconic that I'm sure everyone knows what it's about. Girl gets bullied, things escalate to a whole new level of cruelty. Girl reaches her breaking point and unleashes her rage using telekinetic powers. I like the narrative style with all the newspaper clippings and all the accounts from witnesses. There's so much abuse in this book, like aside from the abuse that Carrie receives from her sadistic classmates and her own mother. Does anyone feel as bad as I do about the poor pigs that get slaughtered in this book? I ended up giving this book 4 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This is probably one of the most scariest books that I've ever read. I wasn't sure I should read this book. I wasn't planning on it, but I saw it in the library and I was like, I'll give it a try. And man, was it scary. I was kind of iffy about this book because I don't really like reading about animals dying, but this book doesn't really focus on that. Sure, it's in there, but it's more about loss and death in general. This book was not only terrifying, but also It was so heartbreaking and tragic, and the ending was worth it. Oh, it was just so scary. I ended up giving this book 5 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Sleepy Hollow and Other Short Stories by Washington Irving. I enjoyed reading these short stories. They were spooky and I loved the elegant prose and really got sucked into it. I would have liked a bit more dialogue though, because this book is packed with long-winded paragraphs, but for the most part I had lots of fun reading about the legends and folklore and thought it was really engaging. I ended up giving this book 4 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Grave Mercy by LaFevers. So this is the first book in his Fair Assassin trilogy. I would say this is most definitely a feminist book where we have our main character Ismay assassinating men that are abusive to women. She is molded into an assassin and uses her abilities to serve the god of death. There's lots of political intrigue, almost too much. I thought the first 2 chapters were really brilliant, but then the book gets bogged down with a lot of stuff that really just slowed the storyline down immensely. I ended up giving this book 3 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Cracked by Eliza Crewe. Although I laughed out loud on numerous occasions with this book, I think the plot could have been like way better. It's kind of a mix between the moral instruments and a supernatural being like a succubus, because the main character has the ability to suck people's souls right out from underneath them. I think the other characters in this book could have used major character development. I thought this book was okay, but I won't be continuing on with the rest of the books in this trilogy. I ended up giving this book 3 stars out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Edgedancer by Sanderson. So this is a companion novel to the Stormlight Archive. I wanted to read this before I got into Oathbringer, so we follow a new character named Lift. I forgot how much I missed being in this world. This was such a wonderful and quick read. I read this book in 2 sittings. I started it last night and then I fell asleep, so then I picked it up this morning and I finished it. It was so captivating. I absolutely loved it and I cannot wait to get on to Oathbringer. I ended up giving this book 5 stars out of 5 stars. Okay, and finally, the last book that I got to this month was It by Stephen King. So I only got about halfway through this book. I am on page 557 and I really am enjoying this book and I plan to continue reading it next month. I didn't get the chance to finish it because I was reading a bunch of other books, so I didn't give this as much attention as it deserves. So far, it's really good and super scary and really creepy. I just love the way King writes his books. I'm kind of sad I wasn't able to finish it, but it's okay. So I'm wondering how this book will turn out, and I cannot wait to continue with it. Alright, so these are the books I read this month. Let me know down in the comments what's the scariest book you've read this month, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!